Who was he? Why was he really there? And the question everyone in the room silently asked, can he afford it? It began with a single step into an exclusive aircraft showroom, a place where only the wealthiest dared to tread. Among the gleaming jets and tailored suits, he stood out, not because of extravagance, but because of its absence. His boots were worn, his jacket practical, and his demeanor unassuming. He didn't look like the kind of man who could buy a private jet. The sales staff noticed immediately, their practiced smiles masking quick judgments. As he walked across the polished floor, all eyes followed him. Then came the moment no one expected. He stopped in front of the most expensive jet in the showroom and, in a calm, steady voice, said, "I'm here to buy this one." The air shifted. A quiet chuckle rippled through the room, barely hidden behind polite smirks. One salesman stepped forward, his voice tinged with disbelief. "This one? Do you have any idea how much something like this costs?" Everyone assumed they knew how this would end. A man out of his depth, walking away embarrassed. But this wasn't just any man. What no one in that room knew was who he really was, or the journey that had brought him to this moment. What happened next would leave them all stunned, and one salesman in particular would learn a lesson he'd never forget. This is the story of a man who challenged assumptions, turned doubt into admiration, and proved that appearances aren't always what they seem. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated? Judged by how you look, where you come from, or what others think you can or can't do? If you've ever faced a moment like that, you're going to want to stick around for this one. And while you're here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that inspires and challenges the way we see the world. Let us know where you are watching from in the comments. Now, let's get started. Who was Darius Coleman, and why had he walked into a showroom known for catering to billionaires, CEOs, and celebrities? Darius's story began in a quiet Midwestern town, where life was simple but not without struggle. Raised in a working-class family, he grew up surrounded by values of hard work, perseverance, and humility. But there was something different about Darius, a quiet determination that would one day carry him to places far beyond his modest beginnings. As a young man, Darius enlisted in the military, answering a call he felt deep in his soul. Over the next 2 decades, his life became a series of extraordinary challenges. He led missions in some of the most dangerous regions of the world, earning the respect and admiration of those who served under him. His name became synonymous with bravery and leadership, though he rarely spoke of his achievements. But what happens when a man who has dedicated his life to service must step into a world that doesn't recognize that sacrifice? For Darius, the transition to civilian life was anything but smooth. He faced the same questions that haunt so many veterans. How do you rebuild? How do you redefine purpose? Darius answered those questions with action. Starting with nothing but his savings and his grit, he built a business with one mission: to give back. His company became a lifeline, delivering supplies to areas devastated by natural disasters and providing employment to fellow veterans. But even as his business grew, Darius knew it wasn't enough. He wanted to expand his reach, to do more, to be more. And that's what brought him to the showroom that day. Darius wasn't looking for luxury or status. He was looking for a tool, a way to amplify his mission. Yet when Darius stepped into that showroom, he was met with more than just the polished jets and pristine floors. He was met with assumptions. Jerry Cooper, a seasoned salesman, had built his career on reading people. To Jerry, success was about appearances, and appearances often told him everything he needed to know. So when Darius walked through the door, wearing boots that had seen better days and a jacket chosen for function over fashion, Jerry thought he knew exactly what kind of customer he was dealing with. Jerry didn't see the veteran who had led countless missions or the businessman who had built something from the ground up. What Jerry saw was someone out of place, someone he believed couldn't possibly afford what he was asking for. Darius's calm demeanor didn't waver as he walked up to Jerry. There was no arrogance, no pretense, just a quiet confidence that Jerry, perhaps, mistook for naivety. But what was Darius thinking? Did he notice the looks? Did he hear the subtle condescension in Jerry's tone? And what exactly was Darius planning to say next? These were questions Jerry wouldn't think to ask, questions that would soon turn the assumptions of everyone in that showroom upside down. What do you do when you're judged before you even open your mouth? How do you respond when people think they already know your story? And how does a man like Darius Coleman navigate a moment like this? Darius's response would soon leave Jerry questioning everything he thought he knew. But for now, the room was filled with unspoken doubts and an undercurrent of quiet skepticism. No one knew what was about to happen, but Darius Coleman did. Jerry Cooper wasn't a cruel man, but always quick to judge people. He was simply a man who had learned to trust his instincts. In his 15 years as an aviation salesman, he had seen his share of dreamers, people who wandered into showrooms like this one, wide-eyed and curious, but utterly unprepared for the realities of the industry. To Jerry, Darius Coleman was just another one of those dreamers. But was he? Darius approached Jerry with the same calm confidence that had carried him through the battlefield, though this was a different kind of arena. He looked Jerry in the eye and said, "I'd like to inquire about purchasing a jet." Jerry didn't respond immediately. He took a moment to size Darius up, his eyes flickering to the man's boots, his jacket, his posture. Everything about Darius seemed out of place in this high-end showroom, and Jerry's instincts told him this interaction wasn't worth much of his time. When Jerry finally spoke, his tone was polite, but his words carried a subtle edge. "Jets like these aren't for everyone. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Darius didn't flinch. He simply nodded and repeated his request. "I'd like to discuss purchasing a jet." Jerry paused, letting the moment stretch. Then, with a faint smirk, he gestured toward one of the smaller planes at the far end of the showroom. "You know," Jerry said, his voice deliberately casual, "we do have some more practical models available, something a bit more affordable." Darius didn't take the bait. Instead, he asked a question of his own. "What can you tell me about this one?" he said, pointing to the largest jet on display. Jerry blinked, momentarily caught off guard. The jet Darius had indicated wasn't just expensive, it was one of the most advanced models in the showroom, designed for long-range travel and heavy payloads. It was the kind of jet bought by multinational corporations, not by men in scuffed boots. "That one?" Jerry asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's a top-of-the-line model. It starts at $20 million. Jerry watched Darius closely, waiting for the inevitable reaction. Disbelief, embarrassment, perhaps an awkward excuse. Instead, Darius simply nodded, as though the price were no surprise. "What kind of range does it have?" Darius asked. Jerry hesitated. Something about Darius's tone, calm, direct, and utterly unfazed, felt out of place. But Jerry couldn't ignore the nagging voice in his head, the one telling him that this was a waste of time. "It can handle about 6,000 nautical miles on a full tank," Jerry replied, his tone now clipped. "It's designed for intercontinental travel, but like I said, it's not exactly an entry-level purchase." Darius nodded again, absorbing the information. "And cargo capacity?" he asked. Jerry's smirk widened. It was the kind of question he'd heard from curious onlookers before. People who wanted to sound knowledgeable, but clearly had no intention of buying. "Enough for a team of executives and their luggage," Jerry said, his voice dripping with polite condescension. "But let me be honest with you, Mr. What?" Darius answered. "Coleman. Mr. Coleman. A jet like this isn't something you just buy on a whim. It's a serious investment." Darius met Jerry's gaze, his expression steady. "I understand that," he said simply. But did he? That's what Jerry couldn't quite figure out. Why wasn't this man reacting the way people usually did? Was he genuinely considering this jet? Or was this just another case of someone dreaming too big? And what was Darius thinking in that moment? Did he notice the subtle mockery in Jerry's tone? Did he care? Or was he so focused on his mission that he simply didn't have time for the opinions of others? The tension in the room grew with each passing moment. Jerry's polite skepticism became more pronounced, his words more pointed. "Mr. Coleman," Jerry said finally, his voice dropping to a lower, more serious tone, "do you understand what you're asking for? This isn't a transaction you can just walk into. It's a commitment, a big one. And to be perfectly honest, most people who inquire about jets like these aren't in a position to buy them." And there it was, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Can you afford it? Darius's response: a quiet smile and a single sentence. "Why don't you let me worry about that?" What was going through Jerry's mind at that moment? Did he see Darius's confidence as genuine or as a bluff? And why was Darius so calm, so sure of himself, when every signal in the room was designed to make him feel out of place? These questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered, as Jerry debated what to say next. And in that moment, the balance of power in the conversation began to shift. Who was Darius Coleman? Why was he really here? And how would Jerry react when the truth finally came out? Jerry Cooper couldn't be calm anymore. He see Darius as just wasting his time. His tone now carried across the room, his words loud enough to draw the attention of others in the showroom. It wasn't uncommon for conversations to spill over in such an open space, but this one seemed to spark quiet whispers and curious glances. Darius Coleman, however, stood firm. His voice remained calm as he repeated his intent. "I'd like to inquire about purchasing this jet." The room grew quieter, the murmurs fading as more people stopped what they were doing to listen. Jerry, seemingly unaware of the growing audience, continued. "This one costs upwards of $20 million, like I said earlier," Jerry said, his tone patronizing. "It's not an entry-level purchase." Someone near the corner of the room stifled a chuckle. Another person exchanged a knowing glance with a colleague. To most of the onlookers, this was nothing more than an amusing interaction. A man, clearly out of place, being told he didn't belong.